Have you ever been in a conversation where a single sentence cut through the air and made you silently think, did he really just say that? It's strange how words can expose more than they intend, our pride, our blindness, our need to sound certain. The wise don't speak less out of fear. They speak less because they've learned where silence holds more power than words. As we step into the first chapter, picture this. A man stands before his team, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen, a smirk on his face. He says, "I know exactly how this works." His tone leaves no room for questions, no space for curiosity. Everyone falls silent, not out of respect, but because they know the door to learning has just closed. False certainty doesn't show strength. It forges a chain that blinds the mind and calls it confidence. Now imagine this same man, months later, sitting in an empty office long after everyone has gone home. The project he swore would succeed has collapsed. The code doesn't run, the system is broken, and no one wants to work under his direction anymore. He looks at the screen, searching for someone to blame. The tools, the timeline, the team, but never himself. That's the tragedy of arrogance. It builds walls where growth could have been. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus warned that ignorance is not the absence of knowledge, but the illusion of having enough of it. When you think you already know, you stop listening. When you stop listening, you stop evolving. There's a kind of quiet irony in those who believe they've mastered everything. The louder they speak, the smaller their world becomes. They live on the surface, mistaking it for the depth. They believe their certainty is power, when in truth, it's a chain. I once knew someone like that, a man named Tom, sharp in skill, but dull in humility. He had 3 years of experience and thought it was a lifetime of wisdom. Whenever someone suggested a new idea, he cut them off. "I've seen this before," he'd say. "I know what works." He didn't read the new documentation, didn't ask questions, didn't seek to understand. And when failure came, it wasn't the complexity that defeated him, it was his own refusal to keep learning. Seneca once wrote, "To know how to learn is to know how to live." Wisdom is not the collection of answers, it's the courage to keep asking better questions. Tom's story isn't rare. It happens in every field, in every life. The moment we decide there's nothing left to learn, life stops teaching us. That's when our growth begins to rot quietly under the surface. True intelligence has nothing to prove. It stands still, listens, absorbs. It seeks truth, not applause. Look at Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, master of armies, ruler of millions. Yet every night he wrote reflections, questioning his own thoughts, challenging his own judgment. If a man with that much power could still doubt himself, what excuse do we have to claim we know it all? The wisest people I've ever met rarely say "I know." They say, "I'm still learning." They don't need to convince anyone of their worth, because their calm curiosity speaks louder than any claim of mastery. They understand that knowledge is like the ocean. Every time you take a sip, you see how endless it really is. To say "I know everything" is to declare that your cup is full when the ocean still stretches beyond sight. The Stoics would call that blindness of the soul, the arrogance that blinds reason and starves growth. So, what should we say instead? Something simple, something honest. "Here's what I understand so far," or "I have experience, but I'm still learning." These words don't make you weak, they make you real. They open the door for new understanding to enter. They show the strength of a mind that values truth more than pride. The moment you admit you don't know everything, you step back into the flow of wisdom. You begin again. Remember this: every field, every craft, every relationship, Every philosophy runs deeper than one lifetime can explore. To stand at the surface and claim mastery is to confuse the reflection of water with the ocean itself. The more you know, the more you see how little you truly grasp. And that awareness, that quiet humility, is the beginning of true power. Because the man who claims to know it all has already stopped growing, but the one who admits he knows nothing has just begun his ascent. This is where wisdom lives, in the empty space between what we think we know and what we're willing to discover next. And as we move forward, we'll see that arrogance doesn't always sound like pride. Sometimes it hides behind another phrase, one that doesn't just stop growth, but chains it completely. Moving into the second chapter, picture this. A man leans back in his chair after arriving 40 minutes late to an important meeting. The team looks restless, the client's eyes on the clock. He smiles, shrugs, and says, "Sorry, traffic. But you know me, I'm not a morning person." Those words, meant to excuse him, seal his fate. The deal collapses, the trust dissolves. And still, he believes he's done nothing wrong, because in his mind, he was simply being authentic. That's how he is. Here's where the illusion begins. 5 words that sound harmless, but rot your potential from the inside out. That's just how I am. It's a quiet form of surrender dressed as honesty. People say it as if it's wisdom, when it's really resignation. I have a temper. I'm always late. I'm just brutally honest. They turn habits into heritage, flaws into personality, as if who they are today is written in stone. But character isn't discovered. It's built. Every choice, every pattern, every moment of awareness lays another brick. When you repeat, "That's just how I am," what you're really saying is, "I'd rather stay comfortable than change." Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. The Stoics believed that a man who refuses to master himself becomes the servant of his impulses. Every time you excuse your weakness, you strengthen it. Every repetition becomes a chain link, forged by the very words you use to justify it. "That's just me," people say, as if they've been carved that way by nature. But even nature reshapes itself through storms, seasons, and time. Why should you be less adaptable than the trees? Let's return to that man at the meeting, David. He wasn't a bad person. He was talented, capable, even likable. But his team had spent 18 months compensating for his flaws. They started scheduling meetings earlier, adding buffer time to deadlines, covering his lateness to clients, not because they admired him, but because they pitied his predictability. And when the biggest opportunity arrived, he failed them all. He didn't lose the contract because of traffic. He lost it because consistency in carelessness always catches up. The moment he walked in late, his reputation walked out the door. Epictetus taught that the first and greatest victory is over the self. Yet most people never fight that battle. They mistake habit for destiny. They confuse comfort for identity. They say, "This is who I am," when what they mean is, "This is what I've chosen to repeat." But repetition is not fate, it's practice. You can practice anger. You can practice laziness. You can also practice patience, punctuality, restraint. You are not fixed. You are sculpted daily by your actions and thoughts. And every time you choose the easier path, you hand the chisel to your weakness. The Stoics never saw authenticity as an excuse to stay broken. They saw it as the courage to admit imperfection and the discipline to rise above it. To say, "I'm still learning." To confess, "I struggle here, but I'm working on it." That is honesty. That is authenticity without surrender. The man who hides behind "that's just how I am" chooses comfort over growth, ego over evolution. The man who admits his flaws and works on them chooses strength over stagnation. The first builds excuses. The second builds character. So ask yourself, how many times have you mistaken self-acceptance for self-abandonment? How many times have you said, "that's just who I am," when what you really meant was, "I've stopped trying"? The Stoics remind us that we are all works in progress, never finished, never beyond improvement. Who you are today is not who you must be tomorrow. You can unlearn what weakens you and relearn what fortifies you. The next time those 5 words rise to your tongue, pause. Ask, is this truth or is this fear speaking? Because every time you declare yourself unchangeable, you deny the very essence of being human, the capacity to grow. You are not the same as you were yesterday, and that's your proof. The phrase "that's just how I am" doesn't protect your authenticity. It buries it. Change is not betrayal. Change is alignment. And when you stop defending your limitations, you finally give yourself permission to evolve. From here, we step into a darker form of blindness, one that hides cruelty behind the mask of honesty and mistakes harm for virtue. Advancing to the 3rd chapter, imagine a room filled with laughter, candlelight, and the warmth of celebration. It's someone's birthday. 30 years of life condensed into one evening of joy. Then, without warning, a single sentence slices through the moment like cold steel. No offense, but the air changes. The laughter freezes. Every eye turns toward the speaker, who mistakes cruelty for candor. That's how a friendship ends, not with a fight, but with a phrase disguised as virtue. There was a night like this. A woman named Rachel, radiant with joy, surrounded by friends. Her cousin leaned across the table, her voice sharp enough to draw silence. "No offense, but are you still with Mark? I always thought you could do better." For a second, no one breathed. Rachel's smile faded, her hands tightened around her glass. She said nothing. 15 minutes later, she returned with red eyes and a quiet face. The damage was done. When confronted later, the cousin said, "I was just being honest." I said no offense first. She believed that a warning could erase the wound, that intention could cleanse impact. But words don't work that way. Saying no offense before you strike doesn't soften the blow. It only confirms that you knew exactly what you were doing. Epictetus once said, "What injures the hive injures the bee." We are not separate from the pain we cause. When we speak carelessly, pretending that truth excuses harm, we cut into others and into ourselves. The phrase "no offense" doesn't soften the blow. It confesses that you knew it would hurt. It says, "I see the harm coming, but I'll swing anyway." It's like throwing a stone and then insisting it shouldn't hurt because you warned them first. True honesty doesn't need armor. It doesn't need disclaimers. It carries the quiet weight of intention and respect. Seneca wrote that truth without kindness is not wisdom, but cruelty wearing the mask of virtue. Yet many people mistake bluntness for bravery. They think that speaking without restraint is strength, when it's often the opposite, a lack of discipline over the tongue. A Stoic learns to master speech as he masters emotion. He pauses before words leave his lips and asks, "Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?" Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of these questions daily. Because wisdom isn't just in what you say, it's in when, how, and why you say it. In that moment at the dinner table, Rachel's cousin believed she was brave enough to tell it like it is. But what she really revealed was her own need to appear superior. She didn't seek clarity. She sought control, the subtle pleasure of cutting under the guise of care. This is how the ego disguises its cruelty. It calls itself honesty. But honesty without empathy is violence. It takes what could heal and turns it into poison. The Stoics would call that ignorance, the kind that hides behind moral pride. When you speak, you hold power over another person's peace. That is not a small thing. A single careless sentence can undo years of trust. The wise understand that words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot return. If truth must be spoken, it can still be done with dignity. Pull someone aside. Speak privately. Choose gentleness over spectacle. The goal is not to prove that you're right. It's to preserve what's human between you. So before you say, "No offense," stop. Ask yourself if the sentence that follows builds or breaks. Most of the time, silence carries more wisdom than speech. The Stoics believed that restraint is the highest form of strength. To hold back when you could wound is not weakness, it's mastery. If you ever feel tempted to justify your cruelty as honesty, remember this: truth never demands blood. It demands courage, compassion, and timing. And if your words require a warning, they probably shouldn't be spoken at all. Because awareness of harm should be a signal to pause, not a permission to proceed. At least this phrase shows that some awareness exists, even if misused. The next one offers no such awareness. It disguises arrogance as integrity and wounds others while claiming righteousness. This is where deception deepens, where the speaker believes they are virtuous while spreading harm. Entering the 4th chapter, imagine this: a crowded office meeting, fluorescent lights buzzing above, the air thick with quiet tension. A man stands at the head of the table, arms crossed, a look of pride in his eyes. "I'm just being honest," he says, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. Around him, heads lower. Notes shuffle. No one speaks. The phrase sounds noble until you notice the silence it leaves behind. That's the sound of a room where truth has been used as a weapon. This is where cruelty wears the mask of virtue. "I'm just being honest," people say, as if honesty alone absolves them of the harm they cause. They mistake bluntness for bravery and cruelty for clarity. But honesty without empathy isn't courage, it's carelessness. The Stoics understood this distinction well. Marcus Aurelius warned, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Yet even he knew that truth without kindness ceases to be wisdom. To speak truth is not enough. One must speak it well. I once knew a man like that. Let's call him Greg. He led his team with an iron tongue. During meetings, he'd humiliate colleagues in front of 30 others. "I'm just being honest," he'd say, pointing out every flaw, every imperfection. "This report is subpar. Did you even try?" At first, people mistook his cruelty for strength. They said he was direct, bold, unfiltered. But over time, his so-called honesty poisoned the air. The meetings became quiet. Ideas stopped flowing. People started leaving. Within 6 months, 3 of his brightest employees quit and 2 requested transfers. Greg didn't see any of it as his fault. In his mind, he was the only one strong enough to tell it like it is. The rest were simply too sensitive. The breaking point came during a presentation to a major client. One of his team members stumbled on a technical question. Instead of stepping in to help, Greg interrupted, smirking. "Honestly, she's not prepared. I told her this might happen." The client shifted uncomfortably. The room froze. The team member's face burned red. They lost the contract that day. Greg blamed everyone but himself. "I was just being honest," he said. "Isn't that what good leaders do? No, Greg, that's what unwise men do. Seneca once wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." Greg had forgotten that. Real honesty doesn't destroy, it refines. It is patient, private, and purposeful. The Stoics never taught us to silence truth. They taught us to master its delivery. Marcus Aurelius called it the discipline of speech, speaking only what you know to be true, and even then, speaking with care. Truth without compassion isn't medicine, it's poison dressed as virtue. There's a massive difference between correction and condemnation. You can say, "Can we discuss this privately?" and still be honest. You can say, "I have concerns about this approach. Let's talk it through," and still be truthful. It's not the truth that hurts people. It's the ego behind it, the need to be right, the desire to appear bold. Those who say, "I'm just being honest," often care more about being seen as fearless than being truly helpful. But wisdom doesn't shout. It whispers with precision. It measures its impact before it moves its tongue. So ask yourself, when you speak a hard truth, do you do it to help or to harm? Do you speak because it must be said, or because you want to be the one saying it? The difference defines your character. Epictetus taught that we must never confuse speaking freely with speaking wisely. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from conscience. If your honesty needs an audience, it's not truth, it's performance. But if your honesty preserves dignity while revealing truth, it becomes virtue. Remember, silence can carry more integrity than reckless words ever will. The Stoics practiced restraint not to hide truth, but to protect its purpose. Because truth delivered without care is not virtue, it's violence in disguise. And so before you claim, "I'm just being honest," pause. Ask, is this the right time, the right place, the right tone? If the answer is no, then silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. When words are guided by discipline, they heal. When they're guided by ego, they destroy. Weaponized honesty is still arrogance. It simply wears the mask of integrity. But arrogance doesn't stop here. It goes deeper. It begins to rot the foundation of responsibility itself. From here, we move into an even darker pattern, the phrase that kills growth entirely. It's not my fault. From here, we step into a quieter kind of downfall, the moment a person's growth stops without them even realizing it. You can see it in their words, 4 small ones, spoken like a shield. It's not my fault. The project fails, not their fault. The argument, not their fault. The unhappiness, the lost chance, the shattered trust, all somehow caused by someone else. Every excuse sounds reasonable. Every explanation feels safe. But safety like that comes with a price, the death of progress. I once knew a man who lived inside that pattern. My brother shared an apartment with him for 2 years. Let's call him Kevin. At first, he seemed like anyone else, ambitious, optimistic, confident. But slowly, a pattern emerged. Missed rent? The bank app was down, dirty dishes piled high. I've just been under pressure at work, lost his job. My boss had it out for me. There was always a story, always an external villain, always a reason that left him untouched by responsibility. Nothing was ever his doing, nothing was ever within his control. Months later, the same pattern reached its peak. Kevin was job hunting. Each time he failed an interview, he blamed the company. They asked unfair questions, he'd say. They wanted someone with connections. After half a year of this, my brother gently suggested he practice his answers, maybe refine his approach. Kevin didn't hesitate. It's not my fault these companies don't recognize talent. One evening, After another rejection, he slammed the door, fuming. He had been 20 minutes late to the interview, unprepared for technical questions. But even then, who schedules interviews during rush hour, he said. How was I supposed to know they'd ask that? That was the moment my brother realized Kevin wasn't searching for solutions. He was collecting excuses. He wasn't living life. He was defending himself from it. Seneca once wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom requires ownership." The refusal to accept responsibility is not protection, it's surrender. When nothing is your fault, nothing is in your power. You trade short-term comfort for lifelong weakness. You feel safe, but you become helpless. You can't steer a ship if you insist the waves are in charge. Life keeps sending lessons, but you keep marking them return to sender. The Stoics had a simple framework for this. Epictetus divided existence into two domains, what is within our control and what is not. But many forget his deeper truth. Our response is always within our control. You can't control traffic, but you can leave earlier. You can't control whether someone likes you, but you can control how you show up, how you work, how you carry yourself. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. Each time you say, "It's not my fault," you surrender the only real power you have, the power to choose your response. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that fate may test him, but his mind belonged to him alone. The Stoic way isn't about denying injustice or pretending the world is fair. It's about refusing to let unfairness decide who you become. Yes, circumstances shape us, but our reactions define us. The one who accepts this truth gains strength from what breaks others. So next time failure arrives, pause before you defend yourself. Instead of saying, "It's not my fault," try, "Here's what I could have done differently." Or, "That was beyond my control, but here's how I'll adapt." Those words don't weaken you, they free you. They return power to where it belongs, your hands. Because taking responsibility isn't self-blame, it's self-respect. It's the refusal to let external chaos govern your internal state. Avoiding responsibility is unwise, yes. But there's something worse, a deeper illusion that hides beneath false confidence. It's the voice that says, "I don't care what anyone thinks." The next step in this descent isn't denial of control, it's denial of connection, and that too is another form of blindness. At this stage, imagine a person standing before a mirror, declaring with defiance, "I don't care what anyone thinks." Their voice trembles slightly, but they raise it louder, as if volume could convince the reflection. They repeat it again, online, in conversations, in every space they enter. Yet, the very need to announce indifference betrays its absence. True confidence doesn't speak, it simply is. The louder someone claims not to care, the more they prove how deeply they still do. I remember someone like that. Her name was Lisa. In college, her favorite phrase was exactly this: "I don't care what people think." She wore it like armor, shining and loud. Every week she posted it online, "Living my truth. I do what I want. Haters gonna hate." In class, she'd make bold statements, daring anyone to challenge her. When they did, she'd smirk and say, "I don't care if you disagree." She'd wear provocative clothes and call it freedom. Every declaration of independence was loud, public, and carefully staged. But the moment criticism appeared, everything changed. When someone left a harsh comment, she would spend hours writing responses, crafting arguments to prove she didn't care. She'd screenshot them to show friends, seeking validation disguised as detachment. If someone questioned her ideas, she'd avoid them for weeks, quietly fuming. The contradiction was painful to watch, because if you truly don't care, why keep defending yourself? Why spend hours proving that others' words don't touch you? Every act of defiance was really a quiet plea. Please see that I'm strong. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth." The wise don't reject all opinions, they discern. They care deeply about judgment from the just and remain unmoved by the shallow noise of the crowd. That's not arrogance, it's clarity. The Stoics never stood in the streets proclaiming, "I don't care what others think." They proved it through silence, through action, through calm alignment between their words and their values. Marcus wrote of this often, but not to the public, only to himself in his private journal. He practiced inner freedom quietly because real peace doesn't need witnesses. Lisa's mistake wasn't confidence, it was performance. She confused rebellion with strength. She thought being unbothered meant being loud about not being bothered. But stillness isn't absence, it's control. True independence isn't announced, it's lived. The Stoics called this alignment with nature, living according to your principles, unmoved by praise or blame, like a mountain unmoved by passing clouds. The mountain doesn't shout about its stillness, it simply stands. Real confidence is calm. It listens to criticism, weighs it, and discards what lacks substance. It values correction over comfort. It doesn't fight shadows on the wall. Seneca wrote, "He who seeks to please all men loses himself." But he didn't mean we should despise the world's opinions. He meant that chasing approval is weakness, while ignoring wisdom is arrogance. The balance is discernment, knowing which voices to hear and which to let pass through you like wind through open hands. If you must prove that you don't care, you already do. Confidence doesn't defend itself, it simply acts. The one who is truly free doesn't argue for their freedom, they embody it. You'll know such people when you meet them. They speak softly, they listen deeply, they live quietly aligned with what they believe. And when judgment comes, as it always does, they remain still, untouched, because their worth is anchored in something higher, their own reason, their own virtue. So, the next time you feel the urge to say, "I don't care what anyone thinks," pause. Ask yourself, who are you trying to convince, the world or yourself? True freedom isn't rebellion, it's serenity. It's not shouting over judgment, but walking through it, untouched. The Stoic doesn't need to claim indifference because their peace already proves it. And yet, even that illusion, this mask of confidence, pales beside what comes next. There is one phrase more dangerous than all the rest. It doesn't just hide insecurity, it destroys growth entirely. It's the sentence that seals the mind shut and ends every chance of wisdom. I never make mistakes. Entering the final chapter, imagine a man standing in a quiet meeting room, surrounded by his team. His idea has failed. The data is undeniable, but instead of admitting it, he leans back and says, "I was right all along. The market wasn't ready. People didn't understand." That's how pride sounds: calm, certain, and completely blind. The moment a person refuses to admit fault, they stop growing. When truth arrives, pride pulls the curtains. I once worked with someone like that. Daniel, my co-founder, was intelligent, persuasive, and utterly convinced of his own infallibility. For months, he pushed for a feature he believed would change everything. We launched it. Users hated it. Complaints flooded in. The numbers plummeted. Yet Daniel refused to bend. "The idea is brilliant," he said. "The audience just isn't ready." When our developer suggested pulling it back, Daniel brushed it off. We just need to educate them. Every mistake became someone else's fault. The market, the users, the timing. Never him. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If anyone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I shall gladly change, for I seek the truth by which no one was ever truly harmed." That's not weakness, that's strength. The wise don't cling to being right, they cling to reality. Daniel couldn't. Over time, the team stopped bringing him feedback. They knew he'd twist every outcome to protect his pride. Eventually, a major client left because of an issue he'd ignored for months. Even then, he said, "They're being unreasonable?" That was the day I realized his pride had become a prison. The Stoics warned about this trap long ago. Seneca wrote that a man who cannot admit his mistakes cannot learn, and a mind that cannot learn cannot live freely. Every error carries a lesson, but only for those humble enough to face it. Refusing to acknowledge failure is like covering a wound instead of cleaning it. It festers beneath the surface until it infects everything. Humility, in Stoic eyes, isn't submission. It's lucidity. It's the courage to see things as they are, not as your ego wishes them to be. To say, "I was wrong," doesn't shrink you. It expands you. It releases you from illusion. Each admission clears the fog between you and the truth. Pride hides behind excuses. Humility steps forward and asks, "What can I learn from this?" That's where growth begins. Daniel didn't lose because his ideas were bad. He lost because he refused to learn. He thought admitting error would make him small, when in truth, it's what makes a person wise. The Stoics understood this deeply. The man who accepts correction becomes invincible because truth no longer threatens him, it strengthens him. So, when you feel the sting of failure, resist the urge to defend yourself. Instead of saying, "It's not my fault," or "I was right all along," try this. "That didn't work as I expected. Here's what I'll do differently." Those words don't show weakness. They show mastery of the self. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily to welcome correction as a friend, not an enemy, because no one was ever harmed by being shown the truth, only by refusing to see it. Pride is fragile. Humility is unbreakable. The man who can say, "I was wrong," has already won the battle most people never dare to fight, the battle against their own ego. These 7 phrases are more than careless words. They reveal the mindset that traps a man in his own limits, where ego replaces truth and comfort replaces growth. The Stoics taught that wisdom begins with humility, not the kind that shames you, but the kind that keeps you open to learning, to error, to change. Seneca reminded us that every new beginning rises from the end of an old one. Each time you catch yourself before speaking one of these phrases, you stand at a crossroads. Continue the pattern or choose the wiser path. That pause is where mastery begins. If this message spoke to you, take a moment to subscribe so we can grow wiser together. And share your reflection below with 3 simple words. Stay humble. Your journey toward clarity is only beginning, and the next lesson may be the one that changes everything.